In just 46 seconds, Jasmine Crockett stood up in a packed congressional hearing and called Donald Trump a wannabe Hitler. Then she opened a red folder and exposed 87 secret detention zones across U.S. military bases. One senator collapsed, a camera feed cut to black. Trump's mic stayed on just long enough to catch him yell, "Get that B***TCH off the air." What could make the most powerful man in America lose control? Live, in front of 41 million viewers. Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. 46 seconds, that's all it took. Just 46 seconds for Jasmine Crockett to set Washington on fire live before 42 million Americans. The moment she stepped onto the congressional floor, the silence felt off, not respectful, not procedural, off, like everyone in the chamber already knew something was coming, something they couldn't stop. Every network was live, C-SPAN, CNN, even Fox. 3 red recording lights blinked across the ceiling like sniper lasers. They weren't just broadcasting a hearing, they were capturing a fuse being lit. Crockett adjusted the microphone, but her fingers didn't tremble. Not this time. She had testified before on policy, on race, on law. But this wasn't about testimony. This was about exposure. Behind her, screens looped muted footage, drone shots of unidentified military convoys rolling through the Arizona desert, grainy black and white images, people loaded onto buses at night, and documents redacted so aggressively, it looked like censorship masks. Title of the session: Federal Enforcement, Overreach, Evaluating the Use of Domestic Force in Civilian Detention. She looked up. Trump's legal team sat across the room, smirking. A few Republicans whispered behind folders. One man had a printed meme of Crockett taped under his binder. Loudmouth Barbie. She didn't blink ... because Jasmine knew something they didn't. Moments before the broadcast, someone had slipped her a folder, read. No markings. No note. Just 3 initials scribbled on the back in Sharpie. PDR. She hadn't even opened it fully, but she saw enough. A signature that didn't belong, a floor plan. A code name, Operation Rebirth. She leaned into the mic. I want to make this clear for the record. What I'm about to share wasn't scheduled testimony. It wasn't cleared by any committee, and it won't make me popular. But I don't care about popularity, I care about the truth. Gasps rippled through the room, like someone had turned up the oxygen and struck a match. The chair of the committee reached forward, about to interrupt. Congresswoman Crockett, you've been asked. No, you've all been asked. For months, about the camps, about the black sites, about the missing civilians, and every time, you gaslit the American public and called it fiction. I'm here to prove it's not. She pulled the red folder from beneath her blazer, like a magician about to reveal the final card. This file didn't come from Twitter, it didn't come from the press. It came from inside your offices, inside Homeland Security, and possibly from inside the Oval Office. Cameras zoomed in. You could hear the scratching of pens, the frantic tapping of aides messaging their bosses. You built facilities on American soil designed to detain U.S. citizens indefinitely, without warrants, without charges. And it's all documented here. A murmur swept the gallery. One woman in the back clutched her mouth. A man behind her cursed under his breath. The file hadn't even been opened yet. Crockett paused, letting the silence twist around their necks like a noose. So here's the question I want every American watching to ask themselves before I open this file. If they can erase people silently, how would you know if it happened to you? It was 2:03 a.m. when the knock came. Soft, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side didn't want to be heard but had to be felt. Jasmine Crockett was still in her office, lights dimmed, laptop glowing with a half-finished draft titled Prolonged Detention Zones. Myth or threat, she hadn't moved in hours. When she opened the door, no one was there. Just a red folder on the floor, no return label, no envelope, no seal. Only 3 letters carved in black Sharpie on the back. PDR. Inside were things that didn't belong anywhere outside of a Pentagon sublevel. Grainy surveillance stills from heat-sensitive drones. A list of names all redacted but one and a top-level memo stamped classify, presidential eyes only, and at the bottom, unmistakably bold in black ink, Donald J. Trump. The subject line, Operation Rebirth, Internal Cleansing Strategy. Underneath, It read, Authorization of Indefinite Containment Protocols for Designated Domestic Risks Under National Instability Conditions. See Appendices F. She turned the pages with cold fingers. Appendix C listed detention zones hidden behind extensions of U.S. military bases in Texas, Arizona, Georgia, and Illinois, not for immigrants, for citizens. Black, brown, vocal. She recognized one name. A local journalist who disappeared 2 months ago after tweeting about unmarked ICE vans. Everyone thought he left the country. He didn't. Jasmine leaned against the wall, breath gone. This wasn't overreach. This was war on dissent. She stared at the folder like it might explode. Her mind raced release it, and she could be ruined. Stay silent, and entire neighborhoods would vanish before anyone asked a question. Her phone buzzed. Unknown caller ID. Against instinct, she answered. You have exactly one window, a voice rasped. Masked. Distorted. Once you open it, they'll know who it was. I'm already gone. She didn't sleep. She just sat in the silence, letting the documents fan out across her office floor like spilled gasoline, waiting for the match. At 5:41 a.m., she called her father. The Reverend Elijah Crockett had marched in Selma, been beaten in '68, and once buried a friend who disappeared after testifying against the mayor. When he answered, his voice was calm, unshaken. Baby girl, you already know what you're gonna do. They'll come for me, Daddy. Then make it count. She hesitated. What if this doesn't change anything? He paused. Then, quieter than thunder but heavier than truth, you're not fighting for now, baby. You're fighting for who gets to exist 20 years from now. Her grip on the folder tightened. No more hypotheticals. No more waiting for someone else to say it first. When she finally stood to leave, the morning light had broken through her window, but it didn't feel like dawn. It felt like detonation. And in her hands was the match that would make America decide whether silence was survival or complicity. The double doors of oversight chamber for C creaked open with the weight of history or betrayal, depending on where you stood. Jasmine Crockett stepped through them like a woman walking into fire she had no intention of running from. Cameras swiveled, the room didn't breathe. C-SPAN, MSNBC, Fox, even TikTok Live, every lens was locked on her. There would be no editing. No delay. No escape. She wore midnight navy, sharp-lined and unapologetic. No staff flanked her, no binder. Just the red folder clutched in her left hand like it had a heartbeat. A whisper ran through the chamber as she passed the front bench. One Republican muttered, "There goes the show pony." Another chuckled, "She brought her damn prop again." Jasmine sat, straight spine, cold eyes, and then the monitors flickered. Trump's face emerged, smiling like a man who hadn't read the headlines or didn't care if they killed him. "Congresswoman Crockett," he began, voice old with mockery, "do you always bring props to hearings or just your ego?" Laughter erupted from two seats behind her. Jasmine didn't even blink. "Only when the prop," she said slowly, "has your signature ordering the illegal imprisonment of 42,000 human beings." Silence, sharp, uneasy, the kind that feels like glass before it shatters. Trump leaned forward on screen. The smile faltered but just for a blink. He opened his mouth, but Jasmine beat him to it. "Would you like to explain what Operation Rebirth really is, Mr. Trump?" A flicker of confusion passed through the room like a virus. Not all of them knew. Not yet. Aide after aide glanced down at their phones. Someone gasped as a notification popped on screen. "Breaking. Crockett mentions classified program. Live." The chairman's gavel hit once, twice. "Ms. Crockett, this committee is not." "This committee has never been ready," she said flatly, rising to her feet. "So I'll speak to the American people instead." Trump's smile twisted. "Be careful, Jasmine. There are consequences for lies that big." She held up the folder, not shaking, not blinking. "Then sue me. But we both know you won't." The screen went static for a second, just long enough to hint at someone pulling cables. But it snapped back. Trump sat still now, no longer grinning, watching. "Operation Rebirth," she said, her voice low and deliberate, "isn't a myth, isn't policy, it's your blueprint for erasing dissenters, containing Black and Latino leaders, and calling it national defense, and I have the proof." You could hear pens dropping. One reporter outside the chamber said later that the Capitol itself felt like it exhaled. Jasmine turned slowly, facing the camera dead on. If you're watching this, ask yourself one question. When the government builds cages with no doors, who are they really meant for? And with that, she cracked the folder open, one tab page sliding out like a trigger, and everything America thought it understood about democracy began to bleed. For a moment, there was nothing but the buzz of the monitors and the slow exhale of a country realizing it might have missed something monstrous. Trump didn't answer right away. His face on the screen twitched not in confusion, but in calculation. Then came the scoff, dismissive, familiar. You people always want to turn national defense into race-baiting theater. The insult landed heavy. Not just you, but you people. It wasn't new, but this time it was televised. Jasmine didn't flinch, she didn't blink. She leaned in, letting the cameras close in on the sharp precision of her voice. Defense, she said coldly, doesn't require hiding children in military zones. It doesn't require black sites or silence or mass redactions. And it damn sure doesn't require barbed wire around playgrounds. Someone in the back row whispered, Jesus. The room didn't breathe. Behind her, a thin man in a gray suit stood, expression tight. He hadn't spoken, he hadn't been introduced. But now, all eyes shifted. This, Jasmine said, is Cole Ramirez. He worked as a systems engineer for ICE until last month. He designed surveillance interfaces used to track non-compliant minors in containment sites. Murmurs broke out, phones lit up, a few reporters bolted from the chamber, no doubt racing to confirm the leak before their competitors. He's prepared to testify about ghost transfers, about biometric tagging of undocumented children, about sites without names, just numbers. Trump's face hardened on the monitor. He's a fraud, a GOP rep barked. He was fired. He resigned, Jasmine corrected, after refusing to reroute 6 undocumented families to a site located inside the decommissioned Air Force Uppins hangar in Nevada. The chairman slammed the gavel. This hearing does not recognize unofficial witnesses without pre-approval, because pre-approval would have let you bury him too. Jasmine snapped. The camera panned slowly to the gallery. A woman mid-30s, hair graying too early, eyes hollow, sat clutching a photograph, a bow. Maybe 6, Jasmine saw her. Not just noticed, saw. Their eyes locked. And for the first time all morning, Jasmine's voice cracked, just slightly. What's your son's name? She asked gently. The woman tried to speak, but nothing came. She simply mouthed it. David. Where was he last seen? El Paso, she finally said. Broken. 2 years ago, they said he ran. But he couldn't even tie his shoes. Jasmine turned back toward the chamber, her voice low and steel-edged. This isn't theater. This isn't fiction. This is a mother, a child, a state-sponsored disappearance. Trump shifted on screen, clearly uncomfortable now. But Crockett wasn't done. If this is the price of safety, Mr. Trump, then who's going to protect us from you? And with that, the room didn't just go silent, it felt like it had swallowed its own breath, waiting to see if justice would finally remember how to speak. It only took one sentence to strip away the presidential polish. You're a nobody. A piece of *T grandstanding on TV just like every other loudmouth who thinks screaming makes them important. Trump's voice didn't crack, it roared. His image glitched for a second on the monitors, but the venom landed clean. His jaw was tight, red blotches crawling up his neck. You could almost see the earpiece dangling useless at his collar. Whatever handler he had clearly long given up. Gasps rippled through the chamber like a wave catching fire. One senator jerked forward in his chair. A Capitol aide turned away from the camera, visibly mouthing, "Did he just?" Jasmine didn't blink. She rose, slowly, deliberately, eyes locked on the monitor like a sniper sighting her target, voice calm enough to cut marble. If I'm a piece of *P, at least I didn't build cages for toddlers in the desert and call it patriotism. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was charged, like the sky before a tornado. Somewhere in the back, a GOP congressman muttered, "Get her censured." Another shouted, "Strike that from the record." The chairman's gavel slammed once, twice, but Crockett didn't yield. "I won't retract it," she said firmly, turning toward the dais. "Not when the man who ran this country talks like a drunk tyrant at a bar fight." The monitor crackled. Trump was pacing now, off camera, his voice still hot, still audible. "She's going to regret this. Mark my words." People like her always end up regretting it. Jasmine took a breath and pulled the second tab from the red folder. A flash drive, small, black, nearly invisible in her palm. Let's talk about regret, shall we? The projector lit up behind her. A waveform danced across the screen. Static, then a breath, then Trump's voice. Not the rehearsed, debate stage voice, the one caught in secret. We handled the immigrants, now we focus on the homegrowns. They're louder, and they vote. Strip their anchors. Redefine citizenship. If they scream, make him disappear. The chamber imploded. One woman in the press pit dropped her pen. Another bolted from the room. The chairman stood, visibly trembling. Trump's image vanished from the monitor mid-feed. Gone. Cut. That was recorded 2 weeks ago, Jasmine said, scanning the room. At a closed-door fundraiser in Tallahassee. Confirmed by 2 federal staffers, one of whom is now missing. She didn't scream. She didn't need to. This isn't about immigration anymore. This is about rewriting the definition of who gets to be American and who gets to vanish. No one moved. Even the Republicans stopped speaking. Jasmine looked directly into the lens, like she was speaking past the building, past the Capitol, straight into the homes of everyone who'd ever felt invisible. So before you scroll, before you change the channel, just ask yourself this. When they're done with the others, who's next? Jasmine Crockett didn't sit. She didn't need to. The room was already on edge, and now she held its pulse in the palm of her hand. She reached into the red folder, once more calm, precise, and pulled out a thin stack of heat-sensitive overlays clipped to a digital tablet. As she tapped the screen, the chamber lights dimmed. A 3D projection flickered to life behind her. Let me show you what erasure looks like. The screen lit up with a map of Texas, glowing red and blue in segmented blocks. Then, it began to change, lines shifting like tectonic plates, carving through neighborhoods with surgical cruelty. In seconds, 5 congressional districts, every one represented by a Black or Latino leader, were gone. Replaced with spliced zones that bled into rural majority-white areas, like veins draining color from a living body. Gasps filled the chamber like oxygen flooding a vacuum. This isn't theoretical. This was uploaded to a secure server 6 weeks ago under Project Reground, designed by a private contractor. Commissioned by an office connected to the White House legal counsel. She tapped again. The map zoomed in. Jasmine's own district TX30 began to dissolve, chunk by chunk, until it was split into 4 irrelevant fragments, each crafted onto districts 100 miles apart. That's me, she said. Or what's left of me. The gallery stirred. One Republican staffer stood up, adjusted his tie, and walked out without a word. But Jasmine didn't turn to look. She was focused on the next layer. Now here's the part they really didn't want you to see. Another tab. Overlays appeared, real-time surveillance data, heat maps, drone footage over residential blocks. Dallas, San Antonio, Detroit, Atlanta, zip codes coded as red zones, not for crime. Not for border violations, but for density of ideological disruption. She paused, let the term hang, let its horror settle. Black and Latino communities labeled as threats because they organize, because they vote, because they don't go quiet. A man in uniform sitting near the gallery all stood up tall, composed, chest full of pens. His hand trembled as he raised it to his mouth. Then, just loud enough to hear over the silence, he said, I wore that uniform for 22 years. And I never thought I'd see this day, he wept. Jasmine turned, blinking hard but refusing to show anything that could be spun as weakness. The camera zoomed closer. This wasn't about elections, this was about extinction. Quiet, calculated, cartographic extinction. They didn't just redraw the lines, they tried to rewrite who counts. Another map faded in, a school, a church, a housing project. All in one red zone. And if they can make us disappear on paper, she said, voice razor sharp, how long before we disappear for real? The room had no answer. She looked directly into the main camera, speaking not just to Washington but to every living room, dorm room, and break room tuned in across the country. If they can erase us here, what makes you think they won't erase you next? By dawn, she was everywhere. Jasmine Crockett's name wasn't trending, it was detonating. MSNBC looped the footage of her standing defiantly in the oversight chamber with the red folder clutched like a weapon. A headline in bold. She took down the room. CNN analysts used phrases like constitutional crisis, whistleblower goldmine, and domestic Nuremberg moment. And over at Fox, they didn't hesitate. Radical black supremacist Jasmine Crockett declares war on law enforcement. Clips were edited to strip context, just her saying erasure and Operation Rebirth out of order, paired with slow zoom images of burning flags and immigration riots from a decade ago. Then came the wave, the digital one. Trump's campaign team released a 90-second expose online, accusing Crockett of everything from ties to Chinese cyber activist groups to marijuana trafficking from college days. The footage was pixelated, the mugshot fake, the document fonts inconsistent. None of it mattered. It was out there, and it was spreading like fire through dry brush. Bots flooded her comment sections, death threats, racial slurs. One image showed a noose photoshopped over the Capitol dome. By 2 p.m., her face was plastered over 3 continents, not for policy, not for courage, but for controversy. The headline war was on. The goal: erase her by distortion. Back at headquarters, her team was unraveling. "You need to pull back," her chief of staff begged, pacing furiously. "Take a media break. We're getting calls from donors, allies, people we need in 2026. They're terrified." Jasmine stared at the screen in silence. Her own voice played on repeat from the broadcast. "This is about extinction. They're gonna destroy you," he repeated, softer this time. She didn't answer immediately, just kept scrolling through the headlines. Unhinged Congresswoman melts down on Live TV. DNC silent on Crockett's accusations. Leaked. DOJ opens ethics probe into Texas representative. Her hands trembled not from fear, but rage. Not because they were coming for her, but because every minute she paused, they kept building the machine behind the curtain. The same machine that erased families, that tagged zip codes like enemy coordinates, that put toddlers behind barbed wire and called it temporary housing. She stood up slowly, her voice quiet but carved from wire. "Let them try." Her chief of staff blinked. "What?" "Let them try to destroy me," she repeated, now louder. "Because if they're burning this hard, it means I hit the fuse." Outside the window, protesters had begun to gather. Some held her face on posters, some chanted her name. One girl, maybe 17, held a sign that read, "If she goes down, we rise." Jasmine placed her palm on the glass and whispered to no one in particular. "They think I came here to survive Congress. They haven't realized yet, I came here to dismantle it." The first photo came through encrypted text, no subject line, no message. Just an image. Her father's church back in Dallas, windows shattered. A red X spray painted across the front doors. Underneath, 3 words in all caps: "Sit down, BTCH, asterisk." Jasmine froze, the air sucked from her lungs. The stained glass that once told the story of resurrection was now cracked straight through the face of Christ. Hours later, a second message, this time to her sister's phone. A security alert from her niece's elementary school. A man had slipped a note into the front office mailbox during drop-off. Inside was a photograph of Jasmine speaking at the hearing. And underneath, a single line scrawled in permanent marker: "Next time, it won't be just words." Her niece is 9. Her favorite color is purple. She thinks Jasmine is a superhero. That night, Jasmine didn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her DC apartment, knees to her chest, the red folder splayed open like a wound. The weight of the nation was one thing, but this was bloodlines. Her voice broke as she whispered into the dark. "I didn't ask to be brave, I just couldn't stay silent." Her phone lit up with hundreds of notifications, most of them garbage. More smears, more doctored videos, another fake arrest record. She was scrolling to silence when one video stopped her cold. A teenager, nervous, sitting in a hoodie on her bedroom floor. "My name's Kiara, I'm 13. I watched Jasmine Crockett yesterday and I don't know, I'd never seen someone talk like that, like she wasn't afraid. And I'm just a kid, but if she can stand in that room and not back down, then I can stand up in mine." Jasmine gave me courage. The clip had over 1.8 million views in under 10 hours. Minutes later, 2 tweets came, one from AOC, another from Jamie Raskin. Both with the same message: "We stand with Jasmine. Truth has a price, we're paying it with her." She wiped her face and straightened her back. Rage was rising again, not the kind that boiled, but the kind that clarified. And just as she began gathering her notes for the next hearing, her phone buzzed once more. An internal memo, leaked, attached, satellite images and land use approvals. To sender, anonymous, the subject line. You need to see this now. It was an updated blueprint for the Black Site program, only this time it wasn't theoretical. Concrete had already been poured. Jasmine zoomed in. The coordinates burned into her screen. Dallas, her district, her home. She stared at the image until her eyes stung. Then she spoke, not to anyone around her, but to the country that kept watching, doubting, forgetting. They're not coming anymore, they're already here. And she knew this wasn't the eye of the storm. This was the silence just before it hit. It arrived in a manila envelope and marked, hand-delivered. No return address. Security didn't catch it. Jasmine found it tucked between her briefing documents like a forgotten page from a forgotten war. Inside was a USB stick and a single note, typed, not signed. You asked what he really thinks. Play this. Room 117, October 12th. Closed door. No logos, no insignias, but the metadata said enough. It came from an internal military contractor's recording device, flagged as redacted evidence, then buried in a file marked behavioral casualties, unprocessed. She listened to it once, then once more, with headphones on, alone. She didn't take notes, she didn't need to. 2 hours later, she entered the chamber. The hearing had already starred, Republicans fuming over doctored maps, conservative media spinning rumors that her father's church staged the vandalism. But Jasmine wasn't interested in spin. She came with a detonation. Mr. Chairman, she said calmly, I request permission to play a segment of audio submitted under Whistleblower Protection Section 702. Suspicious. What is she about to do? One rep muttered. Jasmine didn't wait. She plugged the USB in and pressed play. Crackling static, then laughter, not just Trump's, but military brass to men, one woman, the unmistakable clink of glasses. And then his voice, crystal clear. You know what we should do at the border? Forget drones. Just drop some F*******King gators in there. Let them eat their way through the problem. Laughter. Louder. Then Trump again. Hell, we can even live stream it. Call it Patriot Patrol. Predator Edition. I'd watch the hell out of that. The room recoiled. A woman in the press pit covered her mouth. One congressman's hand twitched toward his mic, then retreated. Trump snapped on the screen. That tape is illegal. That was private conversation, unauthorized. Fake news garbage. Jasmine turned slowly toward the monitor, eyes locked in steel. Illegal like building secret camps and decommissioned bases. Illegal like mapping citizens for preemptive detention. Illegal like weaponizing fear and calling it policy. Trump pointed toward the camera, lips trembling. You're going to pay for this, Crockett. But she was already walking toward the center of the chamber. The joke, she said coldly, is that you think this is about jokes. That people's lives, people's children, can be punchlines in a room full of suits while the country burns outside. She pulled a printed aerial image from her folder, grayscale satellite capture. She held it up high enough for even the back rows to see. Military fencing, floodlights, cement walls mid-pour, coordinates stamped on the bottom. This is in Fort Bliss. Construction began 6 weeks ago. Funded by discretionary FEMA reallocations buried under climate adaptation initiatives. She stepped back, let the photo fall like a gavel. And for the record, we found the camps. And they're ready to hold 20,000 Americans. No one moved. No one blinked. And somewhere in America, someone watching the live stream finally whispered the only word that felt honest anymore. How? The vote was called just after 9:13 a.m., but the storm had started long before. 3 articles of censure, pushed by House Republicans in a closed-door midnight session, were rushed to the floor without warning. No debate, no witness, no ethics review, just a retaliation dressed in parliamentary procedure. The resolution accused Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of violating standards of decorum, spreading disinformation harmful to national security, and undermining the integrity of federal proceedings, words so sterilized, you'd almost forget they were punishing her for telling the truth. The chamber was standing room only. Press swarmed the upper galleries. C-SPAN cameras caught staffers whispering into earpieces, phones lit with alerts from every newsroom coast to coast. The chairman read the charges. Jasmine didn't flinch. Then came the motion. All in favor of formal censure, or word broke out. Not from within the chamber but outside. Through the bulletproof windows, a chant had risen like thunder. Let her speak. Let her speak. Dozens of voices, then hundreds. Then drums, bullhorns, a man shouting her name into a megaphone while waving a red folder replica above his head. Inside, chaos bloomed. Democrats stood in protest. Jamie Raskin slammed his palm on the desk. AOC shouted over the din, "You're scared because she exposed you." One Republican shouted back, "She's reckless. She compromised national defense." Jasmine stood slowly, calm in the storm. "Mr. Speaker," she said, "you don't get to erase me just because I didn't stay quiet." But the gavel thundered, "You are now in contempt. Then let history record me that way." She gathered her folder, nodded once to her team, and walked out without another word. The crowd outside erupted as she stepped through the Capitol doors. Let her speak. Let her speak. They surged toward the barricades, fists in the air, not in violence but in defiance. She paused. The sound vibrating through her ribcage was the opposite of silence. It was belief. And just like that, time snapped backward. She was 26 again. First year out of law school, a Texas courtroom. Her first case, a single black mother, arrested for shoplifting baby formula from ACVS. Cops found nothing. No footage. No witnesses. Still, they held her for 18 days. Her public defender missed the hearing. Jasmine, barely credentialed, stepped in and got the charges dropped in 6 minutes. She remembered the mother's face, ashamed, exhausted, grateful. Jasmine asked what she'd stolen. The woman whispered, "I didn't, but I still lost my job." That was the day she stopped waiting for permission to fight. Back in the present, Jasmine stood on the Capitol steps and faced the crowd, eyes glassy, voice like thunder barely restrained. "This isn't my first courtroom, and it won't be my last." Then she raised the red folder to the sky, not as a threat, but as a warning. A promise, a flag, and in that moment, even her enemies realized. You can vote to silence a voice, but you can't censure the truth. The email came at 3:17 a.m. Subject line in all caps, "We need to talk, alone." The sender was untraceable, but the attachment was unmistakable. A series of DOJ memos, time-stamped over the course of 6 months. The subject line on each: constitutional conflict, internal review of containment to expansion. Jasmine didn't breathe until she finished reading the last line. This program violates the Due Process Clause. If challenged, it will collapse. Beneath that was a signature she hadn't expected in 1,000 years. Senator Alden Voss, Republican, Alabama. The same Alden Voss who once campaigned on zero-tolerance immigration policies. The same man who cheered when Title 42 expanded. The same Voss who once called Jasmine a mouthpiece for the entitlement mob, and now he was the one holding the smoking gun. They met in a private subcommittee lounge beneath the Capitol, deep enough to avoid cameras, but not history. He looked older than the news made him, broken in the corners, like a man used to power but not grief. "You came," Jasmine said, watching him closely. "Because I can't sleep," he replied. "Because I made something that killed my son." His voice didn't crack, it fractured. He slid a flash drive across the table. Jasmine picked it up slowly, cautiously, like it might burn. "Joaquin," Voss said. "Foster child, 7 years old. Taken during a clerical sweep in El Paso. All his paperwork was being processed. They never told us. He was moved 6 times. Final location listed as Site 19. That's the one you showed on camera last week." Jasmine closed her eyes. "I thought Site 19 was still under construction," she whispered. Voss stared into nothing. "So did I, but that's where they found his bracelet. Buried in the sand near a fence line. No body, no death certificate. Just the bracelet." Jasmine's breath caught. It was one thing to know the program was brutal. Another to realize the architects never believed it would come for their own. He opened his case. Inside were printed emails, signed affidavits, internal reviews, all confirming what she'd been screaming for weeks. The DOJ had warned the administration months ago. The expansion was unlawful, unethical, and likely to implode under public scrutiny. No one listened. Voss placed the stack in her hands. "I'm not here to save face," he said. "I'm here to stop others from getting that same bracelet." She looked up, eyes wet but unwavering. "You just saved 1,000 lives." He didn't respond. He just stood and left. No press, no posturing, just tenants. She turned back to the files, heart pounding like war drums in her chest. This was proof. This was prosecution grade. This could flip everything. Then her phone lit up. Breaking. Air Force One en route to Washington. Trump demands lead confrontation with Representative Jasmine Crockett. There was no time to celebrate. She looked out the window as the sirens began wailing down Constitution Avenue and whispered to herself, "Good. Let him come." They called it the night America picks a side. By noon, every major network had confirmed it, a live and moderated, primetime debate between former President Donald J. Trump and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. 8 p.m. Eastern, syndicated across all platforms, broadcast, streaming, even TikTok Live. 1 hour. No scripts, no filters, just war in suits. Within hours, headlines screamed across every feed. The loudmouth versus the law, firebrand face-off, from censure to showdown. The stakes weren't political anymore. They were mythic. Fox called it a reckless publicity stunt. MSNBC called it a moment of reckoning. CNN posted a countdown clock overlaid with a photo of Jasmine mid-sentence, jaw clenched, folder in hand, flames in her eyes. The crowd estimates 80 million viewers, 80 million hearts pounding for either blood or truth. At Campaign HQ, Jasmine's team was scrambling. Makeup artists, legal consultants, risk analysts all talking at once. One advisor urged her to avoid direct insults. Another pushed her to be strategic with emotion. A donor called to warn her to play it safe. "You've already won the moral high ground. Don't set it on fire." She ignored them all. Instead, she disappeared into a small back room, no cameras. Just her, a mirror, and a stack of questions she'd written herself. What would you say to the mother who hasn't seen her child in 3 years? What if the next camp is in your zip code? What if democracy doesn't collapse in a bang, but in a shrug? She read them aloud. Then again. Then again. She didn't rehearse singers, she rehearsed truths sharpened like blades. Meanwhile, Trump's team leaked promotional teasers, dramatic slow-motion footage of him descending stairs, American flags billowing behind him, paired with ominous music and captions like "The real president returns." Then an MCC Hunhone video went viral after showing Trump watching Jasmine's speeches with the audio muted, laughing and pointing at the screen. "She folded in 5 minutes," he told a reporter. "She's not ready for a real man." When Jasmine saw it, she didn't get angry. She got surgical. She turned to her chief of staff and said, "I hope he talks first. He always tells on himself." That night, the green room lights were too bright. She sat still as a stylist fixed a strand of hair that didn't need fixing. In her lap, the red folder sat unopened, not because she needed it, but because its weight grounded her. She didn't wear new jewelry. She wore the bracelet her niece gave her, the one with the purple beads, and a single word: unbreakable. The floor manager stepped in. 3 minutes, Congresswoman. She stood slowly, rolled her shoulders, and walked toward the stage where history had agreed to wait. And just before stepping into the light, she looked to the side camera and said, almost to herself, "The last woman who underestimated me lost custody of Congress. Let's see what happens when a man tries." The opening music was operatic strings cut with electronic thumps, the kind of score meant to announce war. The Capitol Rotunda had been transformed into a temporary stage, lights trussing the high arches like a cathedral prepared for judgment. No podiums, no moderators, just 2 chairs, 20 feet apart, and 80 million eyes waiting on the first move. Jasmine Crockett walked in first, shoulders square, heels loud, folder in hand. Trump followed seconds later, basking in the artificial thunder of his own entrance. He smirked like a game show host. Jasmine didn't look at him, not yet. "Welcome to the People's Forum," the anchor's voice boomed. "Tonight, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett versus former President Donald J. Trump. 1 hour. No rules, no filters, the country is watching." They sat, and for a moment, silence cracked the air like ice. Trump struck first. "You don't deserve to sit here," he spat, before the clock even started ticking. You don't even belong in America. Cameras caught the smirk. His team likely thought it'd land like fire. It didn't. Jasmine blinked once, then leaned forward slightly. And yet here I am, asking why you used FEMA funds to build child cages in the Arizona desert. Gasps slipped through the studio. One producer flinched, another leaned in closer. Trump interrupted again. Those were detention centers, legal, sanctioned. We were protecting the country. Were you protecting the 6-year-old who was left without food for 27 hours? Or the 9-year-old who died of hypothermia because the heating system failed in the middle of January? Trump rolled his eyes. You're reading propaganda. No, she said. I'm reading names. She opened a black notebook smaller than the red folder. Older, handwritten. The camera zoomed in. This is not fiction. These are the names of 22 children who entered your detention system and never came out. Their parents never heard from them again. No transfer record. No release date. No body. Just absence. Trump shifted in his chair. His grin faltered. Jasmine cleared her throat. Alan, Mateo, Carlos, Sofia, Elias, Laz, I could keep going, but I only have 1 hour. And you keep interrupting. He tried to cut in again, but she raised one hand gracefully, not angrily. And somehow, that gesture silenced him better than any gavel could. Don't tell me I don't belong in America. I belong here because I remember the names you tried to erase. Her voice didn't rise, it sliced. The studio held its breath. One camera panned to the crowd outside. Thousands gathered in silence, watching a woman do what institutions had failed to do for years, speak the unspeakable out loud. She looked down for a second, as if steadying herself, then met his gaze. You built camps, I'm building memory. One name at a time, and though the debate was far from over, the audience already knew. She wasn't there to survive him, she was there to outlast the silence he left behind. She waited until the 30-minute mark, exactly halfway through the live debate, before she pulled it out. Not the red folder this time, but a sealed evidence pouch marked DOJ chain of custody, restricted, the kind of bag meant for weapons or blooded clothing. The kind of bag that should never be in the hands of a sitting congresswoman. And yet, here it was, on national television, in Jasmine Crockett's lap. The room shifted, even Trump leaned forward. I wasn't going to show this tonight, Jasmine said, calm as an executioner. But then you called me a liar, again, and I think the American people deserve more than your denial. She unzipped the pouch and pulled out a single printed memo, clipped and weathered, stamped with 3 state seals and 1 presidential insignia. The screen behind her lit up as she held the document aloft. The title in all caps, projected over the Capitol dome, Civic Reset Protocol, Final Phase. The room stopped breathing. Dated February 14th, signed by the former President of the United States and 3 sitting governors: Utah, Texas, and Florida. This wasn't a draft, this wasn't a leak. This was the plan. Trump's expression twisted. That memo is classified. You stole that illegally. Like you stole their futures, Jasmine shot back, eyes burning into him. Like you stole their citizenship, their voices, their right to be heard. She tapped the tablet in her hand. Pages flipped on screen, revealing page after page of chilling policy frameworks. Mass biometric surveillance of high-risk zip codes. Predictive arrest protocols using AI-generated threat profiles. Detention approval without judicial review. And the final clause highlighted in red. Pre-citizenship revocation process. She read it aloud, her voice cold, surgical. The preemptive cancellation of legal citizenship in cases where subject behavior is classified as persistently disruptive to national cohesion, including but not limited to protest leadership, media agitation, and sustained anti-government rhetoric. The audience gasped. One camera zoomed in on Trump's face, jaw clenched, lips tight, no smile left to weaponize. He snapped, "This is all out of context. That was a draft, no authority. You people always twist things. It was signed. You're gonna regret this, Crockett, I swear to God." "That's the difference between you and me," she replied. "I don't need God to cover my crimes." A pin could have shattered the room. The feet held on her for just a beat longer. She looked down, then back up, not at Trump, not at the audience in the rotunda, but directly into the camera. This document wasn't built for immigrants, it was built for citizens. For teachers, journalists, mothers, children who ask too many questions. Voters who don't vote the way you want. The footage wasn't even cold. The broadcast hadn't even hit the West Coast in real time. But within 90 seconds of Jasmine Crockett exposing the civic reset protocol, the internet erupted like it had just been slapped awake. Hashtag civic reset. Hashtag Crockett truth. Hashtag not on our watch. They didn't trend, they detonated. TikTok live streamers rewound the moment frame by frame, zooming in on Trump's twitching jaw, the outline of the presidential seal, the clause labeled pre-citizenship revocation. Twitter X became a war zone of fury and disbelief. On Reddit, whistleblowers anonymously surfaced matching memos, one even signed by a former DOJ official under a burner account. CNN ran a headline in bold red, "Crockett's bombshell, national security or national scandal?" Protests broke out by sundown in over 30 cities. But they weren't chaotic, they were chillingly synchronized. College students in Boston lit up the Charles River Bridge with drones spelling "We see you." A group of Black Army veterans marched silently through Atlanta holding banners that simply read, "We served, they disappeared." In Detroit, teachers left classrooms midday to hold vigils in schoolyards, their hands marked with the names of missing immigrant children. By 9 p.m., the National Teachers Federation, 3 million members strong, had posted a rare public declaration. "We stand with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. No government that surveils students and silences educators can call itself free." Fox News called it coordinated insurrection. MSNBC called it an awakening, and Trump, he called it something else entirely. At 2:14 a.m., just like Jasmine's own warning call weeks ago, Trump posted in all caps, "Crockett is a threat, we need to shut her down. Disgrace to her race and her office." The tweet was reported, then reposted, then printed on protest signs coast to coast. Trump supporters roar in approval, his detractors recoiled in horror. The tweet went beyond politics, it became evidence, a digital artifact of unfiltered hate. Inside her campaign office, now turned into a legal war room, Jasmine read the tweet in silence. Her team fumed. One aide smashed her phone. Her chief of staff looked at her like she was bleeding and didn't know it. But Jasmine, she smiled. It wasn't a smirk, not a victory grin. It was the quiet, knowing smile of someone who had seen the fire coming, walked through it, and now realized she'd made it to the other side, still burning, but alive. She looked out the window. Protesters had gathered on the sidewalk, holding candles and posters, singing her name like a hymn. She'd whispered to no one in particular. Maybe to herself, maybe to the movement. They just made their biggest mistake. And then she turned back to the table, eyes sharp again. Because now, it's no longer just my fight. It started with a voicemail. No name. No caller ID. Just one sentence. He worked for the Bureau. He's ready to talk. 12 hours later, in a church basement in Richmond, Jasmine Crockett met the man behind the message. His hands trembled. His face was pale like paper. And when he opened his satchel, he didn't pull out documents. He pulled out a hard drive, dented, encrypted, but pulsing like it held a heartbeat. Inside, a classified database built by the FBI's Domestic Intelligence subgroup. A blacklist of over 11,000 names, not of terrorists or criminals, but of American citizens, reporters, activists, state legislators, even for sitting members of Congress. And Jasmine Crockett's name was number 16, the code name for the operation, Project Domesticator, a program designed to pre-flag rhetorical disruptors, assign threat colors, and generate social proximity maps to surveil influence across voting districts. Jasmine didn't sleep that night. By sunrise, she had called an emergency press conference. GOP leaders immediately attempted to block all official broadcast channels, citing national security breaches and ongoing internal review, but it was too late. Millions were already watching, on Twitch, on TikTok, on a hacked billboard in Times Square. The live stream cut in, a wide shot of the Capitol steps, Jasmine standing tall in a navy blue coat, the red folder in her hand like it had never left her side. No intro, no preamble, she just opened the file. "What I'm about to show you," she began, "is not conspiracy. It is infrastructure. It is systematized paranoia. And it was built not to stop foreign threats but to neutralize domestic dissent." She clicked the first slide, A journalist from Kansas marked yellow, vocal against ICE. A trans activist from Minneapolis flagged orange high network proximity. A Texas representative labeled RED capable of mobilization. And then she clicked a final name, her own, targeted, due to perceived influence on minority populations. The silence was absolute. Then came the sound of phones buzzing across the nation. Suddenly, the live stream glitched, the screen flickered, black, then static. Then came a white overlay and error screen labeled Content Restricted, Federal Override Protocol 7B. They were trying to shut her down mid-broadcast. The backup mirrors wouldn't live in seconds. The stream split into over 200 versions, rebroadcasted by hackers, high schoolers, grandmothers. A chain reaction of truth. Jasmine didn't blink. She turned to the cameras and leaned in like a lawyer stepping toward the jury that already knew the verdict. You weren't just watching us, you were preparing for war. She let the words hang, heavy, dangerous, unmistakable. Then she held up the last slide, a government seal torn in half, marked phase to launch, T-minus 37 days. And without raising her voice, she said, America, you're on the list too. The only question left is what will you do about it? It happened on live television, a press conference meant to defend the former president turned into his public unmasking. Trump's lead defense attorney, Greg Lanford flushed, sweating, jaw tight took the podium, flanked by aides and cameras. For 30 seconds, he shuffled his papers. Then, with trembling fingers, he pulled out a letter, no one Brett. Effective immediately, he announced, I resign as counsel to Donald J. Trump. I cannot, in good conscience, represent actions that knowingly violated both the Constitution and the dignity of this country. The room erupted, reporters shouted questions. One aide fainted, but the bomb had already dropped. Within hours, Jasmine's team submitted a 1,100-page brief to the Department of Justice evidence-backed, time-stamped, cross-referenced with metadata from whistleblower hard drives and declassified surveillance logs. The final page bore the title, Request for Criminal Indictment, Donald J. Trump et al., Domestic Conspiracy to Commit Civil Liberties Violations. Outside his Manhattan office, a swarm of federal agents delivered 17 subpoenas not just to Trump, but to governors, contractors, and to sitting cabinet members. Helicopters circled above, crowds gathered below. And in a quiet hallway just off the Capitol, Jasmine Crockett stood still, her arms wrapped around a mother who had just been reunited with her 7-year-old son. The boy had been missing for 14 months. Locked in a shadow facility in the Arizona desert. His name never appeared in court documents. His school file had been mysteriously closed. The only record of his existence had been in a USB drive Jasmine received 3 weeks earlier, smuggled from a site codenamed Marlin Yard 6. The mother whispered, They told me I had no case. That no one would listen. Jasmine's reply was barely audible. They were wrong. She stepped in front of the cameras, folder in hand one last time. The crowd was silent. The air was electric. Her voice didn't rise, it dropped lower, into a tone that silenced even the most skeptical ears. This is not about vengeance. I am not here to punish a man. I'm here to repair a nation. And then she paused long enough for the weight to settle, for America to feel the rupture beneath its feet and added. Because justice isn't the end of the story, it's where healing finally begins. The storm outside hadn't let up all morning. Rain crawled down the window pane of Jasmine Crockett's office like a silent metronome. The Capitol was quieter than usual, almost reverent. For the first time in weeks, no cameras. No shouting. No subpoenas being slammed on desks. Just the low hum of a heater, the rhythmic patter of water, and the soft rustle of envelopes she hadn't had time to open. She sat alone, no aides, no folder in hand. Just a teacup gone cold and a stack of letters mailed from across the country, some addressed in crayon, others on military stationery. Her fingers paused on one envelope. No return address. Postmarked from Louisville, Kentucky. Inside, a folded sheet of lined notebook paper, decorated with purple stars. The handwriting was uneven, slanted, and determined. Dear Ms. Crockett, I watched everything with my mom. She said you were trouble, but I think you're the kind of trouble that helps people. I want to be a problem to someday. Love, Kaylin, age 11. Jasmine didn't realize she'd stopped breathing until the tears came, slow at first, then all at once. For weeks she had been cross-examining presidents, dragging secrets into the light, standing alone while the system tried to break her. But this was what cracked her open. She set the letter gently on her desk, smoothing it with her palm as though afraid it might vanish. Then she stood, walked to the window, watched the rain blur the Capitol dome until it looked like it was dissolving. And in a voice no louder than a whisper meant only for herself and maybe for history, she said, "We're not done. Not even close." She turned back toward the desk, took out a fresh page of stationery, and began writing back to Kaylin. "Dear Kaylin, if they ever call you a problem, smile. It means they're afraid of your truth. Keep going." Then, without hesitation, she signed it. The problem. The final shot held her in silhouette against the storm, pen still moving. And just before the screen faded to black, her voice returned one last time, calm, resolute, and more dangerous than thunder. Because sometimes, being the problem is the only way left to rewrite the solution. The clock above Oversight Chamber 7 hadn't changed, still ticking in that same stubborn, steady rhythm. But everything else had. Gone were the gray walls that once echoed with shouts and denials. In their place, murals now bloomed. One showed Harriet Tubman guiding a child across a crimson field. Another, a line of detainees dissolving into shadow while a torch burned quietly in the distance. The seal of the United States gleamed above the days, not brighter, just clearer. Cameras lined the walls, lenses trained not on chaos this time, but on clarity. Reporters whispered beneath boom mix. The usual murmurs before history, and then the doors opened. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't rush. She didn't scan the crowd or perform for the flashbulbs. She walked straight down the aisle, calm, focused, and unmistakably changed. The fire was still there, but now it burned clean. A thin black folder rested in her hands. No monogram, no red ink. Just one word on the cover, amend. She reached the center of the room, adjusted the mic, and looked not at the reporters, but at the people seated behind them, the survivors, the veterans, the mothers still holding on to photos of children taken and never returned. Her voice cut through the silence like a gavel. 1 year ago, I stood in this very room and read names that were never meant to be heard. I revealed cants they said didn't exist. I played audio they said was fabricated. I was mocked, threatened, nearly silenced, but I told the truth. And you, America, you didn't just listen, you answered. She opened the folder. Inside, a draft of legislation titled, The American Dignity Act, a full ban on indefinite detention for nonviolent immigrants and whistleblower protections written into federal law. There were gasps. One reporter dropped his pen. Jasmine raised her eyes. For the first time in this building's history, for tribal leaders sat behind her. So did a refugee from Venezuela, a DACA teacher. And Kaylin, now 12, who clutched her purple star notebook from a front row seat. This, Jasmine said, holding up the bill, isn't just a chapter in the story of what we endured. It's a blueprint for what we refuse to repeat. Her voice didn't shake. But something else did, the air, the foundation. The myth that power couldn't be rewritten. And then she paused. Looked directly into the cameras, no blinking. We don't rebuild broken systems. We bury them so the next generation never has to bleed to be heard. Fade to black. The envelope arrived in a plain manila folder, no return address, no markings, just one instruction in sharp, blocky ink, for Representative Crockett's eyes only. She opened it alone, seated by her office window as rain patterned the glass like static. Inside was a handwritten letter, carefully folded, oddly formal. The handwriting was neat but tense, like the writer had practiced every line until it didn't look afraid. My name doesn't matter. I worked for ICE. I followed orders. I looked away from cages and cried in the shower. I was promoted for being efficient. I thought I was keeping America safe. Then I saw her, my sister, detained in a black site in New Mexico. I asked for help. They called her a test case. I found the memo, the one you read. Civic reset. Final phase. I leaked it because the law was no longer just. I broke the law to fix it. I don't want forgiveness. I want you to win. Jasmine sat motionless for a full minute. No press, no statement. Just the sound of her own breath, sharp, held, released. The kind you learn in courtrooms before delivering a verdict that will change someone's life. She didn't call her staff. Didn't notify security. Instead, she walked into her media room, sat in front of her laptop, and hit record. No lights, no makeup, no edits. To the young man who wrote this letter, she began, "You don't owe me your name. You gave me your truth. You're not the villain they made you play. You were the witness the country didn't know it needed. You broke the law when the law broke faith with the people it claimed to protect. And history, real history, will remember that." Her voice cracked just once on the word witness, but she didn't pause. "We all imagine we'll know what to do when the line is drawn. But you crossed it before the rest of us even saw it coming." The camera caught her glance downward to the letter, resting just beside her hand. One tear rolled down her cheek, unnoticed. Then she leaned in, closer to the lens, eyes direct, tone firm. "You did what was right when the law was wrong, and now, America is watching." She pressed her palm flat against the table, as if grounding herself. "So I ask every American, when that moment comes when it's your sister, your child, your name in the file, what will you do when it's your turn?" Click, end recording, no further comment, but by morning, 14 million people had already watched it. And one ICE office in El Paso was mysteriously closed until further notice. The studio was silent. Not the scripted kind of silence, this was something raw, heavy, a hush that felt earned after a storm that had shaken the walls of Congress, the halls of media, and the conscience of a nation. Jasmine Crockett sat at a simple desk, no makeup crew, no teleprompter. Just her, a single chair, and a live camera blinking red. Behind her, the backdrop wasn't a flag, it was a wall of names, first names only. The ones who had vanished into the black sites. Some returned. Some didn't. She took a breath, not nervous, but deliberate. Like someone who understood the weight of a final word. "This fight wasn't just mine," she began, voice low, steady. "It was for every voice that was cut out of the conversation, for every child erased from the records. For every whistle that was never blown because someone was scared they'd be buried under the silence. They told me I was too loud, too angry, too inconvenient. But I wasn't born to be quiet, I was born to be a problem." The word hung in the air like a verdict, because being a problem meant asking questions. They wanted to stay buried. She leaned forward slightly. Her fingers grazed the edge of a red folder, familiar now, iconic. "You watch them try to erase districts, erase facts, erase names. But here's the truth. They didn't just try to erase me. They tried to erase you, your vote, your voice, your future. But I learned something. You can redraw a map, you can redraw a law. You can't redraw a generation that refuses to be silent." Her eyes didn't blink. She wasn't reading. She was remembering. Some of you are students. Some of you are veterans. Some of you still have tape over your mouths. So here's your moment, a pause. Comment below, what truth still needs to be unsealed? What story is still buried in the files, waiting to be named? The camera didn't cut yet. It waited for her final breath, her final beat. "I'm not here to be remembered. I'm here to make sure you are." She stood slowly, placed the red folder on the desk, and looked straight into the lens one last time. The map tried to erase her, the narrator intoned as the screen dimmed, but instead, it read through a country, then black, then silence. And in that silence, 46 million Americans stayed seated, not because they were told to, but because they felt something shift. Sometimes, standing up means standing alone. Jasmine's journey reminds us that truth isn't always loud, but it's always necessary. When silence becomes the default, courage becomes the disruption. To fight for justice doesn't begin with a microphone, it begins the moment you refuse to be erased. In your life, there will be moments when doing the right thing feels dangerous, but that's often when it matters most. Now it's your turn. What truth in your own world still needs to be unsealed? Comment below and let your voice redraw the map. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.